Hello, and welcome to Building Influence. My name is Rowena Moraes. This is episode 1 of season 1, which is a deep dive into education. We've got a collection of 10 stimulating interviews with creators, leaders, and SME entrepreneurs from around the world who have achieved considerable success in their area of expertise. And these interviews bring together the best strategies, tools, and tips they are found to be most effective in building influence and achieving the goals that drive them. So this show is for anyone busy crafting and creating to realize their vision. It is designed for people who are striving to come up with products, services, and teams. We never stop learning. We learn by doing and experimenting and risk-taking, and we learn from the missteps and failures of others. So this is the place for you to discover new ideas that will keep you motivated and strengthened by what you're working to achieve. Building influence is unique. It looks primarily at how individuals as creators and leaders and business owners have had a significant impact by what they did and how they went about doing it. And the show examines 3 aspects of influence: their profile, their network, and their body of work. And the focus on the small to mid-sized business segment reminds us that anyone can transform their dreams into reality. Although we offer no silver bullets, the lessons drawn from the experience of these guests can help you avoid years of wasted effort and frustration. Now, bite-sized learning enables us to start implementing these ideas immediately. So my guest today is Kari Sutton. Welcome, Kari.
Hi,
Kari,
Rowena. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. So Kari is driven by one obsession: helping parents and other adults who care for kids plant the seeds of mental fitness, resilience, and emotional well-being. Kari is an educator, a speaker, and an author who has helped over 25,000 children, parents, and educators with evidence-based strategies, tools, and approaches to foster children's positive mental health. She launched her second book, Raising a Mentally Fit Generation, in November last year. And she has spoken at over 200 events, both in Australia and internationally, worked with over 300 schools, and has delivered over 500 workshops for businesses, educators, early childhood professionals, and mental health practitioners. So welcome, Kari.
Thank you.
All right, so let's dive straight in.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about your career journey. How much of it was deliberate and how much involved moving with the flow? And, are you currently where you intended to be?
Such an interesting question, isn't it? I don't know if in 2021 any of us are currently where we intended to be after last year. But I think it's been a slower journey. So giving a bit of my background, have been a teacher for quite a while. And as you were talking about that introduction, it really made me think about the journey and how have I planned that and what does it look like? And I guess one of the things I've learned particularly is I need to be clear on the direction I'm going in. And I all know I most probably need to reverse map. So look at my career and say, where do I want to be at the end? And what are the steps I need to take to get there?
Cool. So a lot of it was deliberate then in some ways?
It's interesting you ask that. When a lot of it was deliberate about planning how I get out of teaching. So I'm still teaching at the moment, or I'm still working in the education department,
Mhm.
but I am planning on getting out because I don't want to do that forever. So some of it was deliberate, and some of it at the beginning of my career, I've got to admit, it was like I was a cork bobbing on the ocean. And I was most probably not being as deliberate as I could have been or as I needed to be to get where I wanted to go in the shortest amount of time possible. So I was basically working somebody else's plan,
Mhm.
not working my own. And that's where I've realized now I actually have to have a clear plan. I have to have a clear focus and I need to know where I want to go. Otherwise, I'll continue being a cog in somebody else's wheel.
Absolutely. And I think that many people face that in the early part of their journey anyway. So that's why I was asking whether there was a little bit of going with the flow. So what would you like viewers to know about you from a professional standpoint?
From a professional standpoint, I think I look at it and go, the reason I'm doing what I'm doing, we have a mental health crisis that our children are facing, and it's a whole generation of children. And the thing that I offer parents is I look and say, this actually, I give you the tools and strategies, as well as educators, the tools and strategies, because I've been at the coal face. I know what works. I know how to do those sorts of things. So I guess if you were looking at the brand and talking about a brand, or what I want people to know is that the runs are on the board, the experience is there, and it's actually, these are proven and evidence-based things that work. It's not just some stand up, pull this out of your hat and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. So authentic, reliable, trustworthy, and integrity.
Okay. Can you share with us one tactic that has enhanced the visibility of your professional skills and expertise?
Public speaking.
Okay.
Absolutely, without a doubt. That would be, and as a teacher, we learn to talk a lot. But if I had to recommend anything to people who are coming up through the business world, or through wanting to build a brand and build their own, whether it be their own brand, their personal brand, or their business, learn how to talk to people, learn how to public speak, learn how to get your message across in a clear, concise way, because clarity is king. Unless you can explain it to a 5-year-old and they get it, then you're not going to be able to get your, if you can't do that, you're not going to be able to get your message out there.
Did it come easily to you?
Yeah. That's an interesting question as well. Public speaking came easily to me because, again, as I said, I was a teacher, but being clear, and through the research I've done and through the writing I've done, so I've done postgraduate studies and I'm doing my PhD and writing the book. Or the 2 books actually, but the last book particularly, there was so much I wanted to pack into it. And my editor kept saying, look, you need to be more concise because people aren't going to read a tome, and it isn't a tome. I've now actually got it back. I pared it back. I became more clear about the points I wanted to use and the sorts of things I wanted to do. But writing with clarity is actually hard. Writing 45,000 words, not particularly a problem because people can sit down and do that.
Yes.
But being clear, concise, and to the point, that's when it comes down to it. And actually having somebody go, oh, wow, I get that. I now understand it. Really easy to understand. And so that's what I want in the work that I do, in the online courses I've got. I want it to be easy for people to pick up and implement immediately. So it's got to be clear. It's got to be easy to use, and it's got to be user friendly. And all of those things, they take time. So when you asked, how was that? It takes time to get to that point.
It absolutely does. I mean, it's a bit of a journey. So there's a process to finding your voice, right?
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit about that? And especially, let's talk a little bit about the early days, because that's when things are still forming.
Absolutely. So when I would have started this process, and it was interesting. I found something the other day. It was 2005, actually even before that. And I started thinking about, how am I getting out of the department? What does that look like? And I didn't have my voice then. There was a lot of fingers in a lot of different pies, and I wasn't clear about what I was going to be doing. And I would talk on lots of different topics. And one friend said to me, you can't, having all of these things actually dilutes the message. What are you going to be clear on? And it's only been in the last, most probably 4 years, where I've really come down to it and nailed it. And particularly so in 2012, I went and looked at, I was studying at the University of Sydney Business School. And what we were talking about was looking and saying, can business well-being, how can people in companies, in organizations, does it make sense that their well-being impacts business well-being? And I met somebody who is now a colleague, and I work with her, and she talked about mental fitness. And that's when I realized in 2012 and 2013, that was the term that I really wanted to use for kids, helping them be mentally fit, not just physically fit, but mentally and emotional fitness. And so that's when I started recrafting everything. I found something that I went, that's what I resonate with, because just like we can get physically fit, we can train our brains. But it took a while to figure out, to refine, and to go and draw it back into this lane of focus.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when we're sitting here and talking about it, you're looking back, you can see, and, even hearing about it, it all sounds very clear and everything's in its place. But in the moment, it's just one big mess and you're still trying to figure it out. So it's good to hear to hear about this. What has been key for you in building a strong digital presence and profile?
Consistency. Absolute consistency. That's it. It's you show up. You may not always feel like showing up and doing the work, but consistency is it. So clear message, clarity and consistency. And really fascinating looking at what is working. So for example, on LinkedIn, last year I had I call it one of my unicorn posts, 153,000 views and most probably around 10,000 comments, and looking at on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah, so lots of people were interested in that, but it's fascinating for me that looking at why did it work or what really gathered people's attention. Now, yes, it was a topical story. So yes, it was topical, but it was also, and it had a negative picture to go with it. And I don't know if this is LinkedIn's algorithm, but when I'm working with kids' emotional well-being and things like that, if I'm talking about something that's more negative, excuse me, if it is a more negative post, it actually seems to get more traction. So I don't know whether that's because in life we're used to more negative news stories or things like that, but the negative posts are frequently more the ones that gain more traction, that get picked up, that people will share or comment on, or those sorts of things. So it's just fascinating. When you asked about how do you build a digital presence, look at what's worked, look at what people want, and then give them what they want. Don't just come up with something and go, oh yeah, I want to build that. No, that's not going to work. What are people talking about? What are people concerned about? Understanding that and consistently putting it out there, knowing that that's where you show up. That's what you do, and that's how you do it over and over again. And interestingly, that you asked that, because I took a break over the Christmas holidays. I hadn't had a break the last Christmas because I was writing the book. So I took a break, and it took me a while. I was off LinkedIn and Facebook for about 5 weeks. And I've got to say, my engagement at the end of last year was better than when I came back at the beginning of this year. So I actually said to a colleague and mentor, not going to do that this coming year. I will stay for Christmas. I will keep putting things up consistently, and not expecting as many people to comment over Christmas or things, but I will continually be there, because it's that consistency that the algorithms like. And that's how you build the brand.
Yeah. What was I thinking about? Can you share okay, so talking about consistency here, you're talking about engagement, you're talking about posting.
Yep.
And are we talking purely social media? LinkedIn?
Social media, also on radio. So I've got a podcast that I do with Albany, a place over in Western Australia, or weekly podcast that we do, that I talk about with parenting and different ideas. I comment on different articles that I've seen in the media. So a lot of things. Again, I subscribe to the New York Times, the Sydney Morning Herald, looking. So be aware of the trends that are out there, be aware of what's going on, because be aware of what are the hot button touch points at the moment. Yes. And you can comment on that. And so it's about knowing, not just in one media form, but you can do it in social media, you can do it in traditional media, you can also do it in blog posts or different things, a whole range of things that you realize, it's being relevant. It's actually being out there and being seen. And when you were talking about, what would be the one thing to be? Absolutely. Hone your voice, understand that, but also go out and talk to people. If you are really passionate about something, and I am and I hate the word passionate, I am determined to make a difference. Absolutely passionate about the fact that I don't want kids to have the negative mental health that they're having now. Like, I want to stop this anxiety, the depression, the self-harm. I've seen the results of that. Be passionate about it. Get out there and talk to people about it. So go to Zonta, go to different groups, talk about those sorts of things. Get the message out there, because if your message is important to you and you can articulate it clearly, other people will come along for the ride.
you already deliver workshops, you speak, and you have your, the main work that you do. All of this stuff, commenting, sharing, posting, writing articles, blogs, podcasts, these sit on top of. How do you manage it from a time perspective and in terms of, a whole range of priorities?
A whole range of priorities. A whole range of priorities. One, my child is not at home anymore, so that's one thing. But two is that I'll batch content and I'll look at that and go, okay, what can I do? I've got to be honest with LinkedIn. I don't batch as much content because LinkedIn doesn't particularly like you. I don't believe LinkedIn doesn't like you posting from an outside, say Hootsuite or something like that. So mine is a more organic. Plus, I also tap into what's going on at the moment and being very aware of news stories and the current news articles. So to give you an example, when Chantel Contis, and that was one of the young lady who first started talking about consent and have people been attacked. She was the young lady who now lives in London. And she talked about that. I immediately, and it's not jumping on coattails, but it's actually going, you know what, we do need to start this conversation about consent, and we
Yep.
need to start it in early childhood. So
Yep.
that's where with LinkedIn, I can't batch as much because I'll pick up on what's going on now. But it's actually just going, okay, what are the messages I want to get out there? What does it look like? How do I want to plan that? Do I want to do webinars on these sorts of things? So it's really looking and going, planning it out honestly in a year. And I haven't done this as much as I need to this year so far, but planning it out and going, how can I plan these things in? And you schedule, because one of the things, and I guess this is really dear to my heart, is a discipline of scheduling things in that have to be done. If my content batching has got to be done, schedule it. If I need to go and do a fitness workout, I've got to schedule it. Otherwise it won't happen. So that's one of my routines, is make sure you schedule your day and you put the important things in.
Okay, so for viewers who are not so familiar with batch content, can you just define it a little bit? What it
Okay,
means?
so if I was looking at it, and it would be that I may take a Sunday, a Saturday or a Sunday to do 3 or 4 weeks of posting, pre-posting content on Facebook, on Instagram, those
Social
sorts
media.
of things. So
Okay, short
making
things.
up the posts, absolutely. I go to Canva. If you look on Instagram or you look on my Facebook, Kari Sutton, what you'll see is I actually use a lot of photos. So I'm a very visual, I love really good visual quality visual photos. And what I'll do is I'll use those and put some tags, some quotes on them or things like that. But I do that on a Saturday or a Sunday. So I've got that done for the week. It's like sort of cooking for the week.
So it's more of the shorter pieces, but then you also do the longer articles and stuff like that. Would that be under batch?
As well. They take a little longer to batch, or different things. So blog posts or articles, or I often write things for media. So I'll be putting them out to the media as well. Even so for media, it won't be a long post at all unless it's an op-ed piece. But it will be maybe 100, 130 words that I send out to people and say, look, at the moment, this is topical. Would you be interested in having me on?
Okay. Just the last question on your profile. Can you share maybe 2 or 3 ways in which you market yourself? I know there's a little bit of an overlap with the earlier questions, but anything that comes to mind.
So again, speaking, definitely speaking, and looking at different things. How do we get people's attention? And it's interesting that you ask about that for marketing. It is an incredibly noisy world. And how do we cut through? So it's looking and going, what are the messages, but also that it's not all about me. And if I was looking at doing that or marketing myself, how can I help others? How am I here to serve? It's not just about, oh, isn't Kari great? In fact, no, I'm willing to give away free resources, different ideas, all of these sorts of things, because it helps make people's lives better. And then when people think, oh, who can we go to? My name will become top of mind. So it really is making sure that I'm serving the community, that I'm serving parents and educators, and that I'm doing that in ways that is in my zone of genius. And it just happens my zone of genius is looking down a camera or standing in front of people and relating in that way.
Oh, I love that zone of genius. I'm going to keep that.
That's
All
it.
right.
Go right there.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to another set of questions that are going to revolve around how you build your network. So,
Mhm.
can you share two or three key aspects of networking that you consider important? So, think about people who are completely new to networking, or even those who are reluctant, uncomfortable with the whole idea. What would be some key ideas that you could share?
So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Janine Garner. She wrote a book that I use, the 12 key people, or the 12 key people you need in my network. And it's really looking and saying what people do you need around you, and those are key people. Networking, I cannot tell you how important networking is, but it's not just the networking that we normally think of going to a networking environment or doing those sorts of things. It's actually being service to another person. So, and I know, and you might be wondering what I'm doing, but I have books and books. And I know it's crazy, but these are people's business cards.
Oh my
And
goodness.
what I'll do is I will collect people's business cards. I'll also, once they give them to me, I will write something specific about that person on the back of the business card that I learned about them. And I follow up. If there's anything I can ever do to be of service, please. And so after the event, if I have met them somewhere or those sorts of things, I'll follow up and say, look, hey, great to meet you. I thought you might appreciate this article, or it's things like that. Networking is not about what you can get. Networking for me is more about what can I give? How can
Yep.
I be of service? Because it's really, for me, building that network is, again, that people know, hey, Kari's there. Oh, I could refer her on, or I could do these sorts of things. So I'll happily speak at networking functions or do those sorts of things for free, because I know that that's building my network. I'm being of service to others,
Mhm.
but I'm also helping other people, and they will in turn help me.
And like in the early days, was it something that you felt comfortable with,
No,
networking?
not
Okay.
at all. I didn't. Interesting you asked that, because so in 2000, oh wow, it's almost 20 years ago now, when I first started out a business journey, and it wasn't in this field at all. So I was looking at other entrepreneurial things, and I was feeling sick at networking events. Now I like talking to people, so that's not a problem, but I most probably wasn't in an authentic, or a business that was authentically me. So going and showing up and presenting like that, there was an energetic disconnect, if you understand what I mean. And people
Yep.
can feel that and see that when you talk to them. So no matter how much I wanted to go, I would get this gut-wrenching feeling. And I just, not what I wanted to do at all. So it was concerning. I didn't want to do it. But now, when I've changed that idea of networking and gone, how can I serve? What can I do? And to be really honest, I don't go to as many networking events. I will go and support other people's events or do different things like that. But I don't find, I find I make my network in other ways. For example, through LinkedIn, through the comments I get, through the people I will connect with,
Digital,
and
digital
again,
networking.
it's digital networking.
Yeah. I
And
mean, that's what I call it.
yeah, absolutely. It's looking and saying, who do I want to connect? But it's also not just spamming them and reaching out. For
Mm.
example, I reached out to somebody and said, look, I'd really love to connect because I like your work in this organization. I've seen these articles you've posted. I've really enjoyed reading them. I thought you might like this. So again, it's what can you offer? What can you give back? It's not, networking is not just a one-way street at all.
Correct.
But yes,
Correct.
if you can see behind me, over my left, or that shoulder, those are networking books, and some of them are Janine's books, Janine Garner's books. I couldn't recommend them more highly around the networking space.
Okay, cool. Right, we'll make some show notes as well, so that all of these resources we can add to the show. So, how about two things that you have been doing, um, other than what you've talked about, that has helped you to grow your network, or even one?
Oh, it's okay. Two things that I've been doing that have helped me grow my network. Writing a book. So that
Okay.
was definitely, that again gives more reach. So grows your network, and being willing to send the book. I know it sounds crazy because I launched the book in November last year, and I was actually going to launch the book in May or in late May.
Last year or this year?
Last year.
Oh, okay.
So
Everything was delayed.
Yes, everything had locked down. Had a big launch party planned. Okay, so that all went out the window.
Oh.
And I then launched it in November because I thought, you know what, we need to launch. It's been written. I really want to launch this book in 2020, even though the lockdown is there. So I launched and did that through digital media. So we Zoomed and different things. But I was then also willing to send books to Germany on my own cost. So this would have been maybe $40 or $50 to get books overseas. But I know the fact that if somebody talks about my book and I'm willing to do that, and people say, oh no, I'm willing to buy it. No, it's okay. And I got in touch with them. If they contacted me through LinkedIn or different forms of media or email, I say, hey, absolutely. By all means, send me an email. And we did that. So it's being willing to give first, because you never know. It's like, I often think of it as a drop in a drop of water into a pond or a puddle, and you don't know where those ripples are going to go. So be willing to give, and sometimes be willing to get, because lots of people say, oh, I don't really want to give away all my best stuff. Give away your stuff for free, because people will come back. If they know you've got
Absolutely.
good content, they will come back to you. So those two things: one, writing a book, but two, then being willing to give away a lot of your content for free, and even your best stuff, because you don't have to give it away at all, but you give away your best stuff and they'll come back. They want more of you.
And so was that something that you decided pretty much from the start, or something that you came around to? Giving away your best stuff?
No, from the start. I guess
Okay.
I've had some really interesting entrepreneurial journey, or the friends that I've journeyed along with since the early 2000s, being Frank Kern. If you look at different things, he's an online marketer. And again, and Kerwin Ray was one of my good friends that I met in 2002 and 2003. And I've looked at their journey, and I've also been driven by Gary Vee. And those sorts of things. So again, reading, I voraciously read. I look at what people who are successful are doing and go, what else can I do? Or how can I model that? What does it look like? And that's where I've gone, these are the sorts of things they're doing. This is how I can do it. I can do it with my own spin and my own way, but that's what I do.
Excellent. Okay. Can you elaborate on a couple of the key criteria for your network? Like, how do you make decisions about the types of people that you feel you should connect with?
Yeah, interesting question. One of them is a gut feel. I know it sounds terrible, but it is a gut feel for me. I'll connect digitally, particularly on LinkedIn or different things. However, I will also be very careful of who comes into. So, for example, one of my posts that I've had, actually, it was this year, and I am always polite to people who reply in my posts or different things like that, but I will not tolerate people bullying others. I will not tolerate those sorts of things. So if that person is in my network, or even first or second, like second or third connections, and they come into my feed and commenting on things I write, I'm very careful about things like that. So I have some really strong boundaries for network. One is gut feel, but two is they need to behave with integrity. They need to behave in a way that I would find appropriate if they were talking to me. So if they were talking to others in my network, or they're in my space, that's some really firm boundaries that I have around that. And also then being aware that it's not the quantity of your network, it's the quality of your network. So those are the three things. One that I would go with. One is a gut feel about people. Two, have fairly firm boundaries around what you expect. But three, understand that it's not about having 10,000 friends on Facebook. That's not actually a network. If you look at it on Facebook or LinkedIn or different things, if you have, and interestingly, research is showing this in the business world, if you have 1,000 raving fans, or between 1,000 to 2,000 raving fans that are in your network, that can set you up in business for life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually understanding, how can I nurture the people I've got? How do I nurture my network? How do I make sure those people are safe? and that those people are comfortable in my network and things like that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Outside of that, do you look at in terms of, in terms of educators or in terms of mental health professionals, like wanting to reach out and connect both locally as well as internationally? Is that part of the...
Yeah, absolutely. So if I looked at people like that, and I will reach out to them as well. So if I like somebody working in the space in the UK, definitely reach out to them. One of the people I'm working with at the moment, he reached out to me. He's in Australia, but they're working overseas. And he said, I'd love to come and collaborate with you, or could we do those sorts of things? Absolutely. It's that sort of thing where I will look in the space, but I'll also be very careful of who in that space I will let into my network as well, because I guess for me, and like I said at the beginning, the things that I bring to the table for the people I work with, and one is integrity, but two is I have evidence-based practices. So the things that I recommend, or the solutions I have, are based in science, and they work, and they're evidence-based. I'm not going to, and please don't, I'm not casting aspersions on different things, but I'm not going to be networking with somebody, for example, like Pete Evans, who says, oh, buy my crystal wheel, it will heal your ailments. I really select the people who come into my network quite well. So if there's somebody who most probably sits outside that and says, oh, I've got this thing that will cure children, or will do that, they most probably wouldn't get across that barrier, if you get what I mean. So it's very much, again, the boundaries that I put around my network are they credible? Are they reliable? Do they do what they say? All of those sorts of things before they get in. Because, and this is the thing, I guess, across the board, Rona, is that trust is such a fragile thing, especially in a digital environment, that we can build trust. And I work from I've done Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and you have a trust bank account. And that trust bank account, just like a piggy bank, it can be broken if somebody in your sphere or in your network, and whether they were abusing somebody, you wouldn't allow people to do it on your podcast, on your feeds, or things like that, because trust would be broken. I work hard to build trust with my network, with the people in my circle. I'm not going to have it broken by somebody I don't trust or know or feel good about. And that's where the gut feeling comes in.
Excellent. Thank you. So now we get into a more meaty part of it, which is talking about your body of work, your portfolio. Tell us a little bit about what you consider to be your unique strengths, your professional expertise, which we've already kind of touched on, but now you can really go into it.
If I was looking at a body of work, one of the things that I'm most proud about is working with kids who sit on the spectrum. So I've done a lot of work with children who have social and emotional needs, but also who sit on the autistic spectrum, or who have autism. And I also, guess, I love the work I've done with parents. So from around the mid 2000s, I've been working with parents since mid 1990s as a teacher. So I started teaching in the early 90s. As you can see by the grey hair. But it's always looking and saying, how can I go forward? How can I serve more people? What does that look like? So I then went and I started early childhood teaching. I then went and studied my Masters of Guidance and Counselling. So the one thing that I am also very proud of is that I will go and research. I have a love of learning. And so I will make sure I go and get the science to back up what I'm saying. I don't just stand here and pull things out of my butt and say, oh, look, what a good idea. No, it's actually, this is the science. This is where it's backed up from. These are the peer-reviewed journals it comes from, and this is why it works. And I guess that, to me, and I look at whether it be the chapters of books I've written for other people, talking about how they can do that in their lives, whether it be the 2 books I've written on my own. And one of them I wrote in the mid 2000s called Raising Generation XXL, where actually looking...
That was the first book.
Yes,
that was the first book.
Generation
I had
XXL.
no idea. Okay, so...
That's all right. So that book we're looking at taking to China. I didn't realize one of the things I learned in 2020 was that China has a massive childhood obesity problem. So we're actually, which I would never have thought of. I was watching Dateline in the middle of last year on SBS, and I saw all of these problems, and I'm actually looking at taking it into China in the coming year. So possibly getting that adapted through a Chinese language, because again, it's about how can I serve people? If I can help young people live healthier lives, if I can, and one of the things I do is I talk to parents, and that's one of my strengths, and I play to my strengths. I know that I can tell stories, that I can be relatable. So all of those things, as I said to you, what is my superpower, or what is my zone of genius? And then how do I design a business around that? Because ultimately, I am not going to work, or I'm not going to slave, which sometimes, and we are in SMEs, when we're juggling all these things, you just think like, oh, this is the last thing I want to do. Like, I'm exhausted, but I've got to do all this stuff. Absolutely. I fully hear you, because I've been working a full-time job while doing all of these things. You have to love it. You have to play to your zone of genius. I've got to admit, my husband is nowhere near a public speaker. He doesn't like it, but my websites look as good as they do because that's his zone of genius. So it's knowing where can you surround yourself. As Richard Branson has said before, if you're the smartest person in the room, that's a problem. It's now I've got to be in a classroom. That's not a problem for the teacher. You hope that you are the smartest person in the room, but in a business, if you are the smartest person in a room, that could be a problem, because you don't know what you're missing. And frequently in businesses, we surround ourselves with people like us. So it's actually good to go, where can I tap into different ideas? Where can I look at different things? And I teach kids this as well as parents and other things. It's actually saying, how can I tap into and critically think about my ideas, because they are just my ideas. They may not be the best ideas in the world. So it's looking and saying, I've taken this field of work in early childhood, and I'm now bringing it into the space of positive psychology, and saying, melding these two things together, which hasn't actually been done one hell of a lot before. That's where it's now looking at, and how I'm taking that forward.
Talking about your strengths, can we go into perhaps a specific episode or a specific set of circumstances in terms of how things began to shift for you? So we're talking a little bit about the early days in terms of building this work.
Building a business. So in 2002, the first business I started was called Empowering Business Solutions. So it was a business coaching business, because I had I knew that I needed to do something else. I really didn't want to work for the education department for the rest of my life. And I knew I had to build a business to work for myself. So they taught us, yes, you can coach businesses and you can do different things. Most of in 2002, that was the end of 2002, going into 2003, and they again taught me the power of presenting and public speaking, and I loved it anyway. I had started looking at people like Amanda Gore, who's one of Australia's, she's in the Hall of Fame in the United States, Speakers Hall of Fame. She's also in our Hall of Fame here, Professional Speakers Association. So I really loved her work, and I liked what she was talking about. So I looked at that. They then gave me a process, or put me through some different trainings, and I sold from stage, I sold $9,000 worth of courses. Now, amazing. I didn't do very well. So that for me wasn't, because I had 30 people in the room. That may have been a conversion rate of maybe 3 people bought. So at 110. So it wasn't huge. But what I realized was there's value in information products, and there's value in speaking. And that's when I realized I need to turn this around, and I can do this because of my ability to tell stories, because of my ability to be relatable, and to be willing to make fun of myself to a certain degree, and acknowledge we are not perfect. I will be the first one to say, I have not done anything perfectly in my life. I always worry about getting it right. I always want it to be perfect, but I've learned to take perfectly imperfect action. So I need to go, okay, what does it look like? Actually just get it out there and go with it. There are some things I wished I'd changed in the books, but I just needed to get them out there, because that's a stepping stone. And it's looking at that and saying, how can I do this? So yeah, starting from that point, and I went, and I just went, wow, opened my eyes. And again, last year, it opened my eyes again, because I've got to say, I really like, so I love talking to you, but I would love much better to talk to you in person. So I can do Zoom and I can be engaging and those sorts of things and talk to
Yep.
people and keep, but I really love in-person events. However, I've realized that the world has changed now. So we can do, and I can still get a connection with you. So I can still look down that camera and I can feel connected with you. I can look and see into your eyes and I can be there. So it's almost just as good. So it's really that shift again to know I love working with people and I love being in a room and talking to people and having that interaction, but it's okay. I can do that on Zoom as well. So that's opened up a much broader sphere, if you understand what I mean.
Totally, totally. I mean, me doing the Zoom has opened things up for me as well in terms of the kind of people that I can bring on the show, the kind of people that I've connected. So it makes sense. Whatever you're saying makes sense. I'd like to explore a little bit about the storytelling. So we hear about that all the time. We understand what it means. But if you were talking to somebody who's doing this, pretty much at the start of the journey and kind of hesitant and not quite sure which stories to share, what would you say?
Don't ever do, and this is from a mentor of mine, please don't ever do therapy from the stage. So it's not a place to tell and disclose everything. I will disclose things if I'm talking about, so to give you an example,
Okay.
I talk to parents a lot and teachers a lot about working with young people who have autism. And I often say to people, look, I actually love working with my students with autism because they're really honest. And people sort of go, oh, okay. And I said, I've been told many a time that I smell, which we do because we actually all smell. We have either perfume on, our makeup smells, hairspray smells, deodorant smells, the things we wash our clothes in smell. So I've been told I smell. I've been told that I have a lot of grey hair. And then I've been told that I'm fat. And now the last one, and this is how I tell the story. And the last one was with a high school student. So I actually said to her, look, hey, I don't mind if you tell me that, but I'm concerned because if you say that to other people, they might take offense. She said, Miss, I love you. You don't look fat in your other clothes, but that dress, it makes you look like a fat cow. Don't wear it. And so again, I'm telling them a point. It's illustrating a point, and that's what my stories will do. I will use story to illustrate a point because we learn in stories. We learn from childhood when we learn in stories. So please don't ever, I never make fun. The only person I will ever make fun of in a story is myself. I will never make fun of anybody else. So you never make fun of people in stories.
Okay.
You'll always read the room. Please don't have stories about, and I've got to be honest, I don't have any stories about this, but any stories that are racially, sexually, or any of those sorts of sensitive issues, please don't use them. Because it's not appropriate in these days. I look back on some of the things, like you look back on some of the TV shows or things and you cringe. No, it's not okay
Comedy.
to have things that make people feel uncomfortable. So the stories I use always illustrate a point, whether it be a point about parenting, a point about behavior management, a point about working with people who might be a little bit different to us, a point about how employers can use gratitude to help with employee engagement, because I've lived those things. They're lived experience. I only ever talk about stories that are lived experience. I don't tell other people's stories.
Okay, not other people's stories.
No.
And so because we all have our stories.
Absolutely. And it's about capturing those stories and going, oh, wow. And also, and lots of people say, you can sit and people watch and go, oh, look at that, or look at that. And you can say, I was watching people the other day and I noticed this. So again, it's looking and developing and capturing those stories. But I would never tell anything that would make people feel uncomfortable, and only use personal stories. Do not use somebody else's story because it's not my story to tell.
Okay.
And I had to be really careful about that. when I was writing my book, because my brother, when I wrote Raising a Mentally Fit Generation, we talked about how my brother had a bit of a crisis when his sister, when he's not his sister, my sister-in-law passed away when Mitchell was really little. So he was 5 or 6 and I helped raise Mitchell. And that's when I said, I don't have a child at home anymore. Mitchell is now at ANU. So he's in Canberra studying and doing different things. But I had to be careful with my brother and say, look, these are the sorts of things I'm going to tell. Now, they're not stories about you. The only part that mentions him is the beginning of the book that says, my sister-in-law passed away and Mark had a difficult time and found himself having trouble raising Mitchell. Now, I didn't take over the full care of Mitchell, but I helped my brother raise him. So I wanted to be really aware. So I gave him that opportunity and said, look, read the book, see what you think, and those sorts of things. So he just to know that I'm not telling his story. Yep. I'm telling the stories I had with Mitchell, the experiences I had, what we did as a family and those sorts of things. So it's really important, if you are going to story tell your own story, not somebody else's.
Okay, great point. What have been some of your stumbling blocks in terms of this work that you've been building and building?
Not realizing, and I think you would feel to a certain degree in your field, you would often think people just know this. And because you have all this experience and the body of work behind you, it's almost like you go, I don't really have a lot to contribute because that's just common sense. Common sense is not so common in that so I work in the field of positive psychology in early childhood and different things like that. And I often found it very difficult to stay in my own lane because there are other people. So if you look at Maggie Dent is out there, or Justin Coulson, or other people in that field, actually, Kari, stay in your lane. Your lane is this. You have the experience behind you. This is what you do. This is what you do well. Stay in your lane. It's okay, because people don't, and I guess that's what I had to get over with the book. And it's interesting that you say that, because I don't know if you've heard of Denise Duffield Thomas. So Denise Duffield Thomas is Get Rich Lucky Bitch. She wrote the book and Money Boot Camp and different things. One of the things that I always remember from her earlier work and that I picked up on was, you don't have to be an expert in everything. You just have to actually be able to contribute to the conversation. And that allowed me to go, you know what? I'm not a parenting expert, but what I have is a lot of knowledge that other people don't, that I want to share about how we can help children develop mental fitness. And so it was getting out of my own way, that I don't have to be an expert or seen as an expert. Yes, I want to do my PhD, but that's not actually around being seen as an expert. That's because I want to do some more learning in a space that I want to learn in. It's actually going, you know what? Stay in your lane, stay true to yourself. Don't worry about other people's grass. Tend your own.
Okay. How do you shine a light on this work? I mean, I know we've talked about the marketing, we've talked about the social media posts. If you had to sum it up, how would you describe putting a light to this?
Being willing to say it, being willing. So how would I shine a light on it? An interesting question, because again, it's about getting the message out there, but it's also about willing to put yourself being willing to put yourself out there, because there are other people, there are others doing this, but it's being willing to be a voice and to not stop doing it. I don't know if you know Hetty Johnson. So Hetty Johnson, when I started my teaching career, Hetty Johnson was starting Brave Hearts, which is a program for young people helping young people who've been abused. And I was actually working in the child protection space in education at that time. And I just know Hetty didn't shut up. She's built something since the mid-90s. She didn't shut up. And that's why Brave Hearts is what it is today. I am not going to shut up. I will not be silenced. I'm going to talk to people. So I'm going to connect with the Children's Mental Health Commissioner, or the Mental Health Commissioner in Queensland. I'm going to talk to other people. I'm starting a podcast to talk to people and say, how do we build resilience? What does it look like? How did you do that with your kids? It's getting the message out there. It's not giving up, because ultimately this is too important to not stop talking about. this is important to stop talking about. I don't want to stop talking about it. I will continue. And it's just having that persistence and knowing, you know what, I can actually, and I know it sounds crazy, but I know in my heart, I can change lives. And not only can I change lives now, I can touch the future. Because when I help parents parent their children in a different way, those children go on to parent their children in a different way, and those children's children will be parented in a different way, which means we could actually change in one generation. We could bring mental fitness in if parents understood this concept and knew how to develop children's positive mental health. We could defeat this.
Is that what you mean by touching the future?
Absolutely. That's what I touch the future. I touch the future. And I know it sounds corny, but that's what I believe in my heart. This work is touching the future. It's reshaping the future for children. Absolutely. And I'm the person to do it.
Okay. Last question on this. Looking back at your journey, you will be able to identify some clear markers. You'll be able to identify your process. For somebody who's starting that process of building their body of work and wanting some tips, what just one thing that you could share?
They know them. Tap into what's in here.
Look within.
Absolutely. Look within and trust. Because that was what I didn't do for a long time. When I talked to you about starting empowering business solutions, and I was looking outside, I didn't look within and go, what do I have to offer? I always followed what other experts were doing. Oh, you could do this, or you could do that, or whatever. Mm-hmm. No, tap into what your zone of genius is, because then you will be giving your gift to the world. And that is when it's like a fire. I know it sounds crazy, but it's like a fire is lit and you know, this is what I'm meant to be doing. Mm-hmm. And you just want to do that. So don't doubt yourself, but quiet the mind and tap into intuition and look within.
Yeah, I love that. That really resonates. And it's all about being, getting to 100% of you, bringing the full you to the table and letting the world see. And it's a process, it's a journey, right? Okay, some quick rapid fire questions before we end. 2 habits that you consider essential to your ongoing success.
Self-care and prioritizing self-care and scheduling. So those habits of making sure my day is scheduled in chunks.
What's been instrumental in helping you overcome fear?
Oh, big question. Knowing that actually my father died, and 2 years ago my father died, and I lived through that. No, that's okay. Until that point, I didn't know. Both my parents were still alive. He was in the States, but I lived through it, and now I know even if mum passes away, I can live through it. So it's knowing that this is not going to kill me. Fear, I can do this. Unless it's jumped, I've got to be honest, I do not ever want to jump out of a plane. So I don't see why you do that. But it's actually going, you know what? What's the worst thing that could happen? I can deal with that. I can live through that because I've lived through really, really difficult things before.
What are the guiding principles that have enabled you to play the long game? Some of the key decisions that you think based on these principles?
Being authentically me. So authenticity, integrity, doing what I say, clarity. So, and that clear mind, clear purpose, clear direction. So when I talk about clarity, it's actually taking the time, going back to the habits I talked to at the beginning. So self-care and scheduling, but it's actually about you've got to be clear, and you need to be clear in your life. I know it seems crazy when you're juggling all these balls, but get clear about what you want. Because let me tell you, and I know this but if you don't want to be an entrepreneur, listen to that. Entrepreneurial journey is hard. Know what's going to be there. Don't think that it's going to be a walk in the park or an ice cream sundae every day. No, it's actually working for yourself, as you would know. it takes more time than actually working for somebody else, because you can have holidays and you can do stuff on weekends and everything else. So if I was still just a teacher, I would be doing other things with my holidays. I would be doing other things with my weekends. I wouldn't be doing this crazy juggle. So know what you want and just be really clear about it and go, if this is the journey for me, absolutely. I'm willing to do it, and I'm willing to commit.
And there you have it. My interview with Kari Sutton, who's helping parents and other adults care for kids and plant the seeds of mental fitness and resilience and emotional well-being. Kari launched her second book, Raising a Mentally Fit Generation, last year. Where can people find you online, Kari?
KariSutton.com. So that's at the moment, that is where people find me, and they can find more resources, free giveaways and different things, but you can also purchase the book through there.
Excellent.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for being so open and sharing your journey and your life's work and all of the wonderful, exciting things that you're working on. Wishing you all the best for your book and whatever else is around the corner. And I guess we'll be speaking again.
Absolutely. And I wish you all the best on this journey, because I think it is so important. The work you are doing now, Rona, is so important, because it uncovers and untaps. And people, if they don't think about it, they don't know what they've experienced, but it's helping find those nuggets of gold to go, oh, wow, if she did it, I could do it. Or, oh, instead of reinventing the wheel, this is what I could do. So I think it's a fantastic project. Well done.
Thank you so much. And thanks for coming on the show.
Bye.